Elvis stood there. He was scared, really scared, more scared than people probably knew. It was 1968. He hadn't played live for years. Not really, not like this. He had made movies, lots of them, but they were all starting to feel the same. The songs were bad. The stories were silly. He knew it. The world knew it. He had fallen out of step. The music scene had moved on. The Beatles, the Stones, Bob Dylan, they were making real music, important music. Elvis was making movies about surfing and Hawaiian vacations. He was the king. Or he had been. But the crown felt heavy and a bit dusty. He needed to prove something to himself, to his fans, to the world. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, wanted him to do a nice Christmas special, something safe. Elvis, though, had other ideas. Or rather, the director, Steve Binder, had other ideas that Elvis loved. They wanted to make a rock and roll show, a real one. No Santa suits, no cheesy backdrop, just Elvis and his music. This was his chance, his one shot to get back to who he was, to remind everyone what he could do. So, what song do you pick to start that kind of show? To kick off a moment that would change everything, it had to be just right. It had to be a punch in the gut, a statement, a declaration. It couldn't be a soft opening. It couldn't be something forgettable. It needed to grab you by the collar and pull you in. And it did. Oh, it absolutely did. The moment came, the lights went up, he was in black leather. Head to toe, it was sleek, it was dangerous, it was raw. This wasn't the movie star Elvis. This was something else. Or rather, this was the real Elvis. The one from the early days. The one who made mothers gasp and teenagers scream. He looked out at the small audience. They were close. Right there, you could feel the air crackle. And then the music started. A heavy bluesy riff. It was immediate. It was urgent. It had a snarl. You could feel the bass in your chest. The drums were solid. And then his voice, that voice that had been missing, hidden away in those movie soundtracks. But now it was back. Full throttle. He wasn't singing about sunny beaches. He wasn't singing about puppy love. He was singing about something else entirely. He sang words that were a direct challenge, a warning. He was talking about being bad, about being mean, about being a dangerous kind of guy. It was like he was spitting out all the frustration of the last few years, all the anger at being boxed in, all the longing to be real again. The lyrics were simple, but they hit hard. Every word was delivered with conviction, with a growl, with a sneer. He wasn't asking for permission. He was telling you how it was. He moved. His hips moved, his hands moved, his lips curled. The audience was mesmerized. You could see it on their faces. They were seeing something they hadn't seen in a very long time. The pure, unadulterated energy of Elvis Presley, the rebel, the bad boy, the one who shook up the world. This song, this performance, was a reminder. It was like he was saying, you thought I was gone, you thought I was tame, think again. It was a bold move. To open with such an aggressive, almost defiant number. But it was brilliant. It cut through all the noise, all the doubts, all the years of Hollywood fluff, and it stripped everything away. It said, this is who I am, and I'm not playing around. It put him back in control, it put him back on top, it reestablished his place as a force to be reckoned with. It was raw, it was electric, and it worked. It worked perfectly. But then, just when you thought you had him pegged, just when you thought he was all about the rebellion, the show shifted. The mood changed. It went from that raw, defiant energy to something else. Something more reflective. More personal. It was a smart move. Because Elvis was never just one thing. He was complex. He was the rebel, yes. But he was also a passionate musician. A storyteller. And he wanted to show that side too. So, after that initial blast of pure rock and roll power, the music mellowed. But it didn't lose its intensity. It just shifted gears. The beat became more of a slow, steady pulse. The guitars picked out a gentle, almost wistful melody, and then he started to sing again. But this time, the words were different. The tone was different. He wasn't challenging you anymore. He was inviting you in. He was telling a story. It was a story about a man who loves to play music. A man who travels around just trying to make a living playing his guitar. He sings about being on the road, about the hard times, about the joy of performing, about the feeling of the music running through him. It was a story that felt deeply personal. It felt like his story. Even though he didn't write it, he made it his own. You could hear the truth in his voice, the longing, the passion. He sang about trying to get people to listen, about playing for tips, about the struggle of an artist. It was a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of his movies. It brought him back down to earth. It reminded everyone that before he was a movie star, before he was a global icon, he was just a kid from Tupelo who loved to play music, who loved to sing, and who just wanted to connect with people through his songs. The words spoke of the soul of a musician, someone who just has to play, who can't help but pick up a guitar and share his sound. It was vulnerable. It was honest. It showed a side of Elvis that had been buried under layers of movie scripts and studio recordings. It showed the artist, the true artist, the one who lived for the music. The combination of these two pieces was masterful. It was a 1-2 punch that perfectly encapsulated who Elvis was. The first song was the explosion, the declaration. It was the return of the rebel. The second song was the heart, the soul. It was the explanation, the vulnerability. It said, yes, I'm still that dangerous rock and roll guy, but I'm also this guy. The one who loves music more than anything. The one who has seen the ups and downs. The one who just wants to play for you. Think about the situation. He had been away from live audiences for so long. The world had changed. People were wondering if he still had it, if he was still relevant, if he was still the king. To open with something so aggressive, so in your face, immediately silenced those doubts. It said, yes, I'm here, and I'm still the baddest cat on the block. It reminded everyone of his power, his charisma, his magnetism, and then to follow it up with something so heartfelt, so real, so grounded was genius. It showed depth. It showed that he wasn't just a caricature of his former self. He had grown, he had lived, he had experienced things, and he could convey those experiences through his music. It made him relatable again. It made him human. It made him someone you wanted to listen to, not just watch. The black leather suit was a crucial part of this. It wasn't just clothes, it was a uniform. It was a statement. It harkened back to the early days of rock and roll, to James Dean, to Marlon Brando, to a time when being a rebel was cool, and Elvis was bringing that back. He wasn't wearing a sequin jumpsuit yet. He was wearing the clothes of a working musician, albeit a very stylish one. It added to the authenticity of the performance. It made you believe every word he sang. The whole setup of the show was different too. It wasn't a huge stadium concert. It wasn't a big, flashy Vegas production. It was intimate. It was in the round. People were right there, close enough to touch him, close enough to feel the sweat, to hear every nuance in his voice. This wasn't about special effects. It was about pure performance, and that opening sequence set the tone for the entire special. It said, we're gonna get real tonight. And that's exactly what happened. The energy in that room, the energy from Elvis, was electric. You could feel the weight of expectation, and you could feel him rise to meet it. He wasn't just singing a song, he was channeling years of longing, years of frustration, years of wanting to be seen as a serious artist again. And it all came pouring out in those opening minutes. The choice of these specific pieces also spoke to the times. Something authentic, and Elvis delivered it. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't. He was showing up as himself. And that resonated deeply with the audience. It was a raw nerve. It was pure emotion. The lyrics of the first song were a perfect fit for his comeback. He was like an untamed animal, breaking free from a cage. He was saying, you can't hold me down. You can't tell me who to be. It was a message that had always been at the heart of his appeal. He was the outsider, the one who didn't play by the rules. And he was bringing that persona back to the forefront. But then, the second song. It showed the struggle, the human side of the icon. It talked about the grind, the love for the craft, the desire to connect through music. It showed that he wasn't just a force of nature, he was also a sensitive soul. Someone who understood the everyday struggles of trying to make a living doing what you love. It made him relatable, it made him lovable. The two songs together created a powerful narrative arc. It was like a mini story of his entire career. From the rebellious young man who burst onto the scene, full of raw energy and danger, to the seasoned artist who had seen it all, but still loved to play his guitar and sing for people. It was a complete picture. It was a masterclass in how to restart a career. He stood there, guitar in hand, in that iconic black leather. He looked directly into the camera, directly at the audience. There was no hiding, there was no pretense, just Elvis and his music, and that was all anyone needed. It was a performance that announced his rebirth. It wasn't just a comeback special. It was the moment he reminded the world who the true king of rock and roll was. And he did it with conviction, with passion, and with two perfectly chosen songs that set the stage for everything that followed. He sang that first song with a fire that had been missing for years. Every chord, every word, every movement was charged with electricity. It was confrontational, it was confident, it was pure, unadulterated swagger. He owned that stage, he owned that moment. He took back his crown with that opening blast of sound. It was a defiant roar, shaking off the chains of his past movie roles and reminding everyone of his primal power. He was an animal unleashed, and then, just as people were catching their breath, still reeling from that initial shock, he shifted. He leaned into the microphone, his voice still powerful, but now infused with a new kind of emotion. A deeper, more introspective feeling. The second song was like a conversation, a quiet confession. It peeled back the layers of the superstar and revealed the man underneath. The man who truly loved to sing, loved to play. He sang about his journey, about being on the road, about the simplicity of making music. It wasn't about fame or money in that song, it was about the pure joy of the craft, about sharing a piece of your soul with strangers. It was a raw, honest portrayal of an artist's life. It resonated with anyone who had ever felt the pull of a passion, who had ever struggled to make their way, who had ever just wanted to be heard. The contrast between the two pieces was what made it so extraordinary. One was a fist-pumping anthem of rebellion. The other was a soulful, reflective ballad. Together they painted a complete portrait of Elvis. They showed his duality, the wild, untamed spirit and the sensitive, yearning artist. It was a carefully calculated move, but it felt completely natural. It felt like him. The pressure on him that night was immense. His entire career hung in the balance. This special was his last chance to reclaim his identity, and he knew it. The choice of these opening numbers was not accidental. It was a conscious decision to make a statement, to tell the world, without saying a word, exactly who he was and what he was capable of. And he delivered it with every fiber of his being. He poured his heart and soul into every note. You could see the years of frustration, the years of longing, etched on his face. But you could also see the joy, the pure, unadulterated joy of being back where he belonged, on a stage, performing live, for people who truly appreciated his music. It wasn't just a performance. It was a purging, a release, a rebirth. The impact was immediate. People who had written him off were forced to reconsider. Critics who had dismissed him as a relic were suddenly paying attention. Fans who had been waiting patiently for his return were ecstatic. He wasn't just a memory. He was back. And he was better than ever, more mature, more seasoned, more powerful. This opening was a game changer. It redefined what a television special could be. It showed that you could be raw, authentic, and powerful on network television. It influenced countless artists who followed. It proved that sometimes the simplest approach, the most direct approach, is the most effective. No fancy tricks, no elaborate staging, just a man, his guitar, and his voice. He stripped away all the pretense, all the Hollywood gloss, all the layers that had built up around him over the years. And he presented himself as an artist, a true artist, someone who was deeply connected to his music. And that's why it worked. That's why it was so powerful. That's why it's still remembered as one of the greatest moments in television history. It was honest. It was real. It was Elvis. Back in black. Back to his roots. And back to being the king. He wanted to show everyone he hadn't lost his edge, that he could still shake things up, that he could still be a little dangerous. And that first song did exactly that. It was a jolt, a sudden burst of energy that announced his presence. It was the sound of a rock and roller, pure and unadulterated, and he delivered it with a sneer, a swagger, and a whole lot of fire. He was sending a clear message: I'm still here and I'm still the baddest. But then, that second song, it brought him back down, it made him human, it showed his love for the music itself. Not the fame, not the adoration, but the simple act of playing and singing. It was a tender moment after the storm. It was like he was inviting you to sit down with him, look him in the eye, and hear his story. It was deeply personal, it was intimate, the combination of the two was just perfect. It was a complete statement that said, I am powerful, I am a force, but I also have a heart. I am strong, but I am also vulnerable. I am the rebel, but I am also the musician. It showed all sides of him, and that's why it was so effective. It wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a carefully crafted narrative told through music and performance. He had been hiding behind movie roles for too long. He had been singing songs that didn't feel like him. This was his chance to shed all that, to rip it all away. And he did it spectacularly. With those opening two numbers, he tore down the walls he had built around himself. He stood exposed, real, and utterly captivating. The raw energy of that first song. The almost desperate plea for authenticity in the second. Together, they created a powerful emotional journey for the audience. Testament to his understanding of his own appeal and his desire to reconnect with his audience on a deeper level. He wanted to be remembered not just as a star, but as an artist. And he achieved that in those crucial opening moments. The decision to pair these two specific songs was a stroke of genius. It was a declaration of war on his stagnant career, followed by a heartfelt plea for understanding. It was the wild spirit and the gentle soul, all wrapped up in that iconic black leather. It was the perfect way for Elvis to reclaim his throne. And it showed the world he was back, in every sense of the word. The songs he chose to open his 68 comeback special were called Trouble and Guitar Man.